Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on our Uncut Threads discussion. Today, we will be discussing the topic of the fabric of protest. So, in today's discussion, I have four guests with three guests and myself today, and we're going to just chat a little bit about quilts shows and whether or not specific categories should be dedicated to fabrics of protest and or social justice. And so thank you, ladies, for joining me. Um, sorry, let me just make sure. Sorry. Thank you, ladies, for joining me. Again, my name is Lisa Spain Moore, and I have the pleasure of hosting this chat today. And with me, I have Donna Chambers, Genevieve Phillips, and Kay Whittington. And we will have a little discussion about the fabric of protest. So I'm going to start off by saying, full disclosure, I have never entered a quilt into a quilt show. So I'm going to go first, and then the other ladies will join me, and they'll tell you a little bit about themselves and the quilts that they're going to display, and share a little bit about them and why they think what they think about this topic. So um, let me share my screen. Sorry. Let me share my screen. Okay. Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, goodness gracious. Why won't it let me share? Okay, sorry. Hmm. Mm, okay, I'm sorry. Oh, wow. This is oh, sorry. Well, this is unusual. I'm sorry, gang. Oh boy. I'm on the first one. I'm sorry.
Have you listed yourself as the host?
No, maybe that's what it is. I'm I'm not the host. Oh gosh, I'm sharing. No. Mm. Chan- Okay, thank you. Thank you. All righty. Thank you very much. Okay, so here I am. A little glitch, but we're here. So, so my name again is Lisa Spain Moore. I have been quilting for about 13 years or so, and I just love it. And that's all I'm gonna basically have to share with that. Um, okay, we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So last year, and this is my quilt that I made, obviously for the 2024 election season, and it was a quilt that I saw online from one of the, I guess, modern quilt groups that had this pattern for to do the Kamala quilt, and so I just decided to do it, and I just incorporated this last year, and I had it at a local exhibit that I did, and so this was during a time during a presidential election, and then next slide.
Very nice.
Thank you. And
Very
this
nice.
second one was about obviously since we're as women always struggling to make ourselves known that we're here, that we deserve to be, free and deserve to have all the rights that God-given rights that we're entitled to. And so this was another quote that I feel as though was addressing an activism. It was in lines of activism and women's rights. And
Very
so this was
nice.
something, thank you, that I did for that as I did it last year as well. And so those are the only two quotes that I have to share that I think has to do with social activism and or social justice. And so now I will go on to Donna Chambers, who is familiar with entering quilts into quilt shows, and she can share with you what she chooses to share. So welcome, Donna.
Thank you very much, ladies, and Lisa for inviting me. This is my first trial at this online, uh, Zoom talk about quilts. I've been quilting since about 15 years or so. When I started quilting, I let me go back a step. I studied fashion design in college, and we sewed and we sewed and we sewed. And when I decided to start working on quilts, I thought quilts were just squares, cut, sewn back together, cut again, until I was challenged to a quilt by Cookie Washington, where I did she was doing a mermaid exhibit. And so I had to, it was a subject I had to do with some research, and I had to look around, and, it was like, oh my God, it was fulfilling. So the picture on the right, coming to America, that was something that I did early on. I was in a class and the lady said, do whatever you want to do, do whatever you want to do. And that meant, I don't know what that meant, but that's what I did, where I learned how to make a bigger, I guess you really don't want my technique, but
Yeah,
it's about a
tell
big,
us.
excuse me. I'm sorry, what did you say,
I
Genevieve?
would just say, yeah, tell us.
Oh, my technique. Well, I don't know if I had a technique back then, but I was all about, by then I had a bunch of fabric, we just go crazy buying fabric. And I found this New York fabric, and I looked in a book, and a lady talked about how you make the forefront bigger, and then you make as the image goes up, you make the characters smaller, so it gives that dimensional look. And so I don't know, I was in New York, and I just got that idea. And then this other quilt, No Justice, No Peace, that's that was during COVID. So during COVID, we were home, just sewing away. And my daughter, this is my daughter, she was doing a bike tour in Brooklyn from uh, the Brooklyn Museum to Coney Island. So it was a picture, and she gave it to me, and I said, well, I'm going to make a quilt. And, I got into it because it was her. And then you see that little shadow by her feet.
Yes.
That was special to me. And then she was born in Brooklyn, so I put, some Brooklyn accents on it. And at some point, this quilt was sold to the International Quilt Museum of Lincoln, Nebraska.
Nice.
So they own it, and it's in their, private collection. I don't know when they have it out, but that's what they say. So that's
Nice.
my social justice, protest, equal rights. And then this quilt, it's called the Galabi Ladies. Dr. Meslomi, she gave everybody something from the UN's equal rights. There was number. How can I explain it? Equal rights, and there were like 10 or 12 different equal rights statements throughout the world that she was using to hand out to everybody. And she wanted people to do equal rights outside of the United States. So, that's kind of like, to me, that's kind of like a very serious subject. So I picked these Indian women, which is a sad story, but they wear bright colors. So it made it better for me. The Galabi women are women that fight for the rights of women and children. They wear pink and they march through the streets. And I don't know if you can open it up and see, there's women along the bottom, and they are carrying signs that tell some of the things that they fight for. You know, if a man sees his woman looking at another man, he might just boil her in oil, you know?
Wow.
And children, you know, it's intentional, you know, intentional. I girls, I'm getting old. I can't remember all these things. Intentional harm on women. They star them. You see the lady on the far right. You see the scars on her face. That's what they do.
Yeah.
That's what they do to the women. And so, you know, this was it's about 50 by 50. And this is when you say social justice. Should it be should they have you know, a section in shows? Well, I don't know. I did put this in a show. It wasn't a black show, but it was in a white show. And there were a couple of Indian women, and they wanted to talk about it. And they said, you know, I read this in an article, and they said, well, you know, this is what happens. But you know, you can't just, you know, I wouldn't just put this in any show, you know, not in the church show, or you know, you just, I mean, it's things that happen in the world, but you know, you gotta pick your poison, I guess, lack for a better word.
You know
You know,
your
some of
audience.
the
I think you're trying. I think
your
you're your
audience,
audience where you
yes,
know whether or not who's going to be coming to that particular quilt show or the audience of the show, and
yes, the audience of the show, like the one of my daughter, that was like during Black Lives Matter. So white folks saw that everywhere.
Mhm.
You know, sometimes, you know, I don't want to have to defend myself. So, you know, I choose my day, or my, you know, the show, or where it's at. Or if it's an all black show, you know, anything goes.
Yeah. Yes. Makes sense.
So, you know, that's my story about, and then this quilt is a series. And I did it not for a show, I did it just because I wanted to do it. I had the pieces, like the orange flowers on the top and the red ones on both sides.
Mhm.
Those are some of my grandmother and my mother's handkerchiefs. I wanted to do a quilt of handkerchiefs, but that was just too flowery. So what I did was, you know, I backed all the handkerchiefs, and then I found the centerpiece. I found a black and white print piece of fabric that I had in my stash, and you know, I colored the little children in the center, you know, the clothes to bring it out,
Mhm.
and I call this handkerchiefs in history. So, you know, again, that's social justice during slavery, where mommy has to take care of the little white girl, and, you know, the little children of color are sitting on the side. And then I mixed it with African fabric to give that, you know, like, you know, to give it more flavor in our culture, our early culture, I guess I would say. Because
Yes.
I call it 1880. So
Yeah. Beautiful work.
That's nice.
thank
Work is
you.
gorgeous, you know, and
Beautiful, awesome, awesome work. Beautiful
yeah,
Thank you.
stories.
and
And
I
Beautiful
know
stories.
I did three different, I did a series of three. And I was only doing two, but I have a cousin, he's the film director. And it was made, you know, it wasn't, I didn't make it with him in mind at all, because I didn't know what he did. But he was doing a film about social justice. So he loved these things, and he had to have them. So I said, okay. They're about, all three of them are about 30 by 30 or 36 by 36. And, you know, they're all done with different subjects. There's one with the centerpiece is like a advertisement for soap. So there's a little black girl in this, and then there's a there's a title underneath that the manufacturer put in. With this soap, it'll clean her white as snow. So that was very,
Please.
that was the
I
kind
mean,
of thing that you don't put in any,
Yeah.
So
So I mean, so you would pick and choose, like if you depends on what kind of show you would be in as to whether or not you would want any of your particular work in that show because of how it might be received, like you were saying that you pick your poison, so to speak. Like you don't want controversy. If it's your work, you decide what you want to put in or not, and if it's accepted, it's accepted, and if not, then that's okay too, I guess.
well, I had an experience recently. It wasn't a show. It was I'm a collector of a lot of stuff. So I had some turn of the century postcards, and they, everybody in the group was not kind of white. They were white. And so they were looking at other people had racist cards also, but then the white folks were talking about, well, what do you think about this? Do you think that's racist? This is a nice little girl, blah blah blah. What do you think about that? And yours are, what do you think about yours? I said, well, during that time, turn of the century, black folks weren't manufacturing anything. You guys are what put these postcards together. So, in that period, they could make you look as ugly as possible, lips big, to make white folks scared of us. So, I didn't feel like going hard like that. So I picked my poison.
Yeah.
So it's kind of you know, Lisa, the pieces you do, the latest piece that you did, I mean, that is just showing us at our greatest.
Yeah.
And sometimes these protests and equal rights and all of that, it's kind of can be hard.
Yeah, they are
And
definitely difficult topics. They can be.
yes,
And
yes.
people, it's a difficult thing. I mean, and it's not based on necessarily race-based things, but it's just it's the experience, each individual's experience in life, and how well and what you quilt or what you make based on your own personal experience. And so
Yes. Dr. Lomi says that difficult topics are stories that have to be told.
Yeah.
Or else that history of our ancestors is just gone.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And I think that's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your beautiful work. I appreciate
thank you,
coming
darling.
on and
Nice.
sharing it with us.
Very
And
nice.
It was my pleasure. They needed to
Yeah.
come out and be seen, these girls.
yes. Okay. And so now we have Miss Genevieve Phelps. Thank you
Hey.
for joining us.
And thank you.
Hi.
Hi, Genevieve.
Hi.
Hi. Hi. Can you see me or hear me? Everybody
Yes.
can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Enjoyed you, Jeff.
All right. You're going to show my stuff here?
Yep. You can next slide.
Let me tell you a little bit about me. I only started doing this about 4 years ago. I had been trained as an artist. I went to school for artists, have a master's degree in art, and then I went to work as a social justice advocate for teachers. And I did that both in Minnesota and in Maryland and in Washington, D.C. with the NEA. And so once I retired from NEA, I went back to doing what I always loved was to paint and draw. And so this time, though, I did it a little different from what I had done or how I'd been trained. I was primarily a portrait artist in pastels. and a potter. And so instead of using pastels, and a number of my work I have are in pencil and pastel. I never used really oil painting because the turpentine made me sick. I couldn't stand the smell of it. So I did lots of paintings and drawings with pastels and pencil. So this time when I retired, my daughter's a quilter and she had tons of fabric. And so I decided that what I was going to do is use her scraps and use the same techniques I would use when you're painting and use fabrics instead. And so I started this process of actually painting with fabric, with scrap fabric. And she had tons of African print fabric because at the time we were making face masks for COVID and we were making them with African print fabrics. And so we had a lot of extra fabric. So I've combined both my history of my work history of being an activist, a social justice activist, with my artwork, and this time with fabric. So I chose African print fabric, which we had a ton of. Usually wax prints, which my daughter got from actually from Africa. Some of it we tried to stay away from the fake stuff, the knockoff African prints, and so so I started making these series of drawings and paintings using these fabrics. So what you see here is part of a series that I did representing what I call the revolutionaries. This was a women's piece for Black revolutionary women. And this one is Fannie Lou Hamer. And if you know the story or remember the story of Fannie Lou Hamer, how she was beaten really bad she was in prison by the guards made the black men in the prison beat her like she was a man. And she was a social justice activist, and she was very famous for saying, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired."
Sick and tired.
And yeah, and so I think this was before a congressional hearing, that's where she was talking about, and she was a very activist, civil rights activist. So what I did was to represent her and the two other people as what I call the revolutionaries. So I've used her hair in with using the Black Lives Matter fabric, which I had lots of prints of that. In fact, we were making masks that had Black Lives Matter on it. And then the African print fabric, the kente print in the back. And then so it's a combination of fabric, and then the sign is actual paper with printing on it. It says nobody's free until everybody's free. And that was one of her famous quotations, as well as I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. So this was it's 10 by 10. It's on canvas. And it was a series of really six of them, three of them women, Fannie Lou Hamer, Angela Davis, and Rosa Parks. And then the three men were Malcolm X, Obama, and Martin Luther King. So it was a series of six of those that I had done. These three are currently on exhibit in Philadelphia at an exhibit on women's history. So this was the one. The first one was Fannie Lou Hamer.
Okay.
The next one is let's see. This is Rosa Parks, and this is the one from where she was arrested for refusing to give up her seat on the bus. And so the numbers are the numbers that she had to hold up when they took her photograph at the jail. And so this one has the same. Yeah, it still has the Black Lives Matter in her hair. I used an African fabric for her clothing, and then her sign says, "The only thing I was tired of was tired. I was tired of giving in." And so this is a quote from her, and it's part of the Revolutionary series. Again, all of its fabric. It's on. This is a 10 by 10, and I started out with skin color, and then I decided to change it in to create just different colors into the faces to create to give that sense of who she was. Okay,
Yes.
and then the third one is this is
Angela Davis.
Angela Davis, right? And this one again is with fabric. You see the Black Lives Matter as part of her face on her side, on the left hand side. And then this is a quote she from Angela Davis saying, "I'm no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I'm changing the things I cannot accept." So this is again an abstract. It's all African print, and it has the thing I put in there is I had some extra little gold earrings that were pierced, and I don't wear pierced earrings, so I put the earrings. Those are actual earrings that I put in for her. For her, she was famous for wearing those big loop earrings. So these were my revolutionaries, and so as I said, these are on exhibit through the end of April at a museum in Philadelphia. So when I think a lot of my work is 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 controversial. It's social justice work. I do slaves. I'm working on a piece right now with um, 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 James Baldwin, um, and it'll have, some some sayings from James Baldwin into the painting. So a lot of my work is um, it speaks to my experiences because now in my later life, I've lived through the 50s. I lived through the civil rights movement. I lived through Obama and the changes, and now I'm living through Trump. And
Mm.
so I have that experience from that period on, where I grew up in segregated schools. I lived a segregated life. I didn't go to school with white people till I was in graduate school. I went segregated all the way through. I went to HBCU, and when I went to graduate school, was one of my first experiences of working or having working with white people in a classroom setting. I did teach, and I taught in a primarily all white school, but I had a grounding in who I was as a black person, and so I didn't make apologies or excuses for being black. I mean, because my experience had always been black, I didn't have to make up, trying to like people because I was white or they were white and I was black, and it always worked for me, and I always sought work that had a social justice theme to it. So as far as I noticed something where there was some controversy about the Quilt Con, I believe, where people had put in some very controversial political kinds of um, of quilts into QuiltCon, and they separated them out, and people were upset that that's not quilts and that type of thing like that. I don't think it should be separated out. A quilt is a quilt, and a quilt has a certain meaning for whoever makes it, and that when you segregate out, oh, it's too political or makes some people uncomfortable and that kind of thing, then that defeats the whole purpose. The whole purpose of of bringing people together is to be able to appreciate the differences and stuff. So I found that a little bit annoying when I saw that. I think it was QuiltCon where I saw that there were a number of quilts that talked about this whole thing that Trump's doing and all that kind of stuff, and people were very upset that it wasn't, a beautiful Baltimore quilt, or it wasn't a beautiful cheese bin quilt or something like that, and that it messed up their program to have that kind of controversy. So I don't usually do programs. I usually put my work in work where I know it will be appreciated, and
Yes.
I don't right now, and I have some pieces in in a federal courthouse, as a matter of fact, and it's slave pieces. It's quilters from all across the area of Maryland, and of course it has beautiful Baltimore quilts, quilted quilts. They have beautiful other kinds of traditional quilts, but then they have my work, and my work has to do with men of color, and so it's Malcolm X, it's Martin Luther King, it's Frederick Douglass. So it's a combination, and I haven't had too much push. I haven't had too much pushback from it. You know, it makes some people uncomfortable, but if I'm juried and I get in it, then that's how I go. I put it out there, and if they accept it, they do, and if they don't, they don't. But I
I mean,
don't make excuses for not doing.
exactly, because if you think about it, it's American history. It's part of the history of this country. So why you can't, I mean, like you said, certain if you try to put it in a quilt show and it gets juried and it's not accepted, then that's okay. It is what it is. It's fine, but you're not going to shy away from expressing yourself, because quilting is an art form that should be embraced as freedom of expression, right? So
Exactly.
it's
Yes.
kind of hard to not focus on things, as individuals, on things that's important to us. So I agree with you wholeheartedly to celebrate yourself and celebrate what it is that's important to you, Genevieve. So thank
Right.
you so much. Your work is beautiful, and really
Thank you.
appreciate
Yes.
you sharing it with us.
Beautiful.
Thank
Both
you.
of the
Yes.
ladies are beautiful.
Thank
Thank you.
you,
Wow.
Yes.
Mhm.
Genevieve. Oh my
Beautiful.
gosh.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes. And so now we have Miss Kay Whittington joining us today. Thank you for joining us, Miss Kay, and you can share with us whatever you like.
Well, listening to both of the ladies, I've enjoyed every bit of what they've done. I feel rather displaced.
No.
I think I'm going to come from a different perspective.
Okay.
Um, I Most of the background that I have in regards to quilting is being chairperson to many shows, judge, and a jury individual for a lot of the quilt shows. I've been quilting for over 40 years. I
Ooh.
started quilting from Ohio to Oklahoma to California, and now I'm back in Michigan where it's colder. So this is where I stand. I've had the opportunity to exhibit some of my quilts in some of the major quilt shows. Some rejected, some not. A lot of them are traditional quilts. They're not social issue quilts, but they're pretty much of that perspective. I had the opportunity to have one entered in the European Patchwork exhibit with the NAAQG group with Cynthia White last year, and that went to Paris. But it was basically dealing with musicians. So it's always an honor to be accepted in any show, in any show.
Mm.
Um, Basically, what I thought that I would probably object is I think I heard this earlier from Genevieve. Um,
Mm.
know the show that you're going to enter. You cannot stop what you want to exhibit or make because that's how you feel. That is basically an African American expressing the freedom of speech and protest. You can't stop that. We tell our stories and we want everyone else to know about our stories. However, when you start to enter some of these quilts and some of these large major exhibitions, they have rules and guidelines.
Mhm.
And I wanted to go back and look at a couple of them. And I think QuiltCon was mentioned. QuiltCon's rules and guidelines are very open and they're progressive. Their risk is low and they pretty much will accept most quilts. But AQS operates and demonstrates on the willingness to remove the work if they choose to do that. And that um, I kind of jumped away from that because I was going to show you in the next slide. But since we're at this particular slide, let me go back. These two particular slides are done by a friend of mine. There's quite a few of them belong to the Women of Color, Carolyn Maslumi's group. And these two particular quilts are done by April Ship. And because I was the chairperson of one of the shows that she exhibited this into one of our local shows, it was not accepted in the white group. So when these two particular quilts were exhibited in the Great Lakes African Quilt Group, it brought about stories. The one on the left is called Strange Fruit. And April spent a lot of hours researching those that had been hung or injustice was done to them. And she wanted to do this. And the year that this particular quilt was shown, there were people, African American families, that came to the show and recognized some of their relatives on her quilt. And she did this particular quilt based on throughout the United States, families that were lynched from women to men. And it was a very moving quilt. It made a great conversation piece among African Americans, but not among white quilt groups. They could not accept that because they wanted to deny that these things don't happen. In her other quilt, which was the Water Return, April felt that she needed to do this because there was a group of kids that were in a refugee camp that had been tortured, and they were running and fleeing from this refugee camp. And apparently, in that situation, the boat collapsed. And April felt when she heard the story that the child drowned that was with the family, and she wanted to exhibit the boats in the background and the child in the hand of the parents, but the child returned back to where it left because the body was, the waters brought the child back. And she said it was so moving. However, there were families, even in the white group, they were moved by it, but it was so moving that they did not want to exhibit that at that point, at that time. It might be a little open now because of the war and Iranians and all the different groups, but at the time that this was exhibited, it had a bad feeling among the groups. We can move on to the next slide. Now, in this particular group, we are talking about, and I think I heard Genevieve mention the AQS rejecting this. Yes, AQS rejected Amigos Moratos. It was done by Jonathan Shannon. And the next quilt was also done by the Sakwa group. And that Sakwa group did a women's right reproduction. It was a whole series, about 21 quilts, red quilts. And because AQS felt that it was not conducive to their theme, they rejected both of those. Now, Jonathan was a best award-winning fiber artist in 1994. So when he entered this quilt, which really had to do with AIDS and the LBG, the LGT group of people, and yeah, and yeah, I had it's a tongue twister there. And because of that LGBT issue, the AQS said no, this was not going to go. Even though he had won Best of Show in 1993 for his air show, and in the 100 award show for one of the top best quilters in the country, this one was not accepted. At the time, AQS refused it. However, I asked this question: was it, as of today, has it been exhibited? Has it been exhibited anywhere else? Smithsonian, anywhere? And no, it has not. We still have not accepted that fact that this was a graphic portrayal of dead friends. That was the title that it was called, Dead Friends, but it was in Spanish, Amigo Moratos, because he was relating this quilt to a lot of his friends that had passed on. Now, in that situation, the Sakwa people accepted it and QuiltCon accepted it. But QuiltCon and Sakwa are a little more liberal. I did also researched local groups and State Fair and the Smithsonian. Smithsonian has not accepted that. Smithsonian collects quilts, but they are very liberal when it aligns with their themes. But Smithsonian will exhibit a quilt like this, but they had not accepted that one so far in a collection. But I find that They've accepted Faith Ringgold's, some of her collection. They definitely have accepted Carolyn Mazlumi's quilts also in the Smithsonian. So those type of quilts are more open when you start looking at the major organizations that will accept social issue quilts. There was someone, local quilts like state fairs, they're sort of selective also. Again, you have to look at your guidelines. Uh, what what an organization will and will not accept in a show. I did have an issue last year because I judged some quilts in the Michigan State Fair, and this particular quilt just happened to be an LGBT quilt, and I judged it. He had good points, and it was a gentleman that did it. But every time I went over to see where it was being displayed, it was turned upside down. And so I went back to one of the organizers to ask them. I thought it was the public that was turning it upside down. And I went back to ask her why, we need to tell people to take them, do not touch the quilts, blah, 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 blah. And come to find out, she was the one that was turning the quilt around because she said, quote unquote, we do not accept those quilts in the state fair. I was a little set back. I thought that the state fair was a little more open to accept quilts as long as um, they were in good condition, and the binding, all of the basics that most guilds accept, as far as your workmanship and your color and your bindings and the stitchings and so forth. But apparently they were not ready to accept that, and that was the last year. So it'll be interesting this year when I go back if that same policy applies. No, I did not see any rules or regulations on their application. So it is important to look at the applications and where you're going to apply to see what their guidelines are as to whether it aligns with their themes. Um, the last one, I'm not sure if Lisa got that particular one. Okay. In this particular one, this was done by Holly Shenley, and that also was rejected by AQS for the simple reason it did not align with their theme of being wholesome and traditional. Um, they always enjoyed looking at Hollis's work because most of her themes are based on African families, villages and so forth. But someone protested this particular quilt because of the nature of how it looked. And they felt that this was not good because there were children that were coming to the show and they did not want to see a nursing mother. So AQS refused it. So, yeah. So you can, some of these big time shows can get real critical and technical about how they accept things. Um, Sometimes there's community quilts. I don't know if some of you ladies are probably aware of it. I really just found out about it a couple of weeks ago, and I was fascinated by it. And it was called the Social Justice Sewing Academy. They're out of Santa Clara, California, because I lived in California in Santa Clara. But so if you go online, look them up. These are young people that are creating social justice quilt and quilt blocks that are being shown in the communities. And the good thing, QuiltCon actually had them in their show. They accepted them and as a special exhibit in one of their shows. And all of these are dealing with Black Lives Matters, hatred, hangings. But the purpose of this organization is to allow these kids to uh, to remember their family members that were unjustly done wrong, that were treated wrong, that were shot in inhumane. Um, their feelings. They were able to be able to learn sewing skills, so that's a good positive thing. But they were also able to talk about their feelings, about how the injustice of society has become towards mankind. Um, I know I had a lot of stuff that I could say and would say or don't say, but I think the main thing is to ask the question, what is the major, one of the things that Jonathan Shannon's rejection of his dead quilt friends brought about was a discussion of censorship. and social issues in quilt shows. And so one of the questions that we need to ask ourselves when we do enter our quilts, should this quilt be allowed in the show? Do I want to represent what type of organization this is? But no, I will definitely say do not not enter a quilt in a show. You just have to see what their guidelines are, or if you're willing to accept it, because there are some shows that are jury shows and some
Right.
are judge shows. And so you have to think about that because there is a distinction between jury and judged shows. And so I mean, if you're willing to accept the rejection or the criticism, enter it, because it depends on who's looking at it. I think one of you ladies mentioned the quote in regards to I think it was Donna mentioned the Indian family. They knew what that story was all about, those Indian ladies. A
Yes, they
lot of
did.
people, a lot of people did not know, but they knew and they understood the storyline behind that. But if you had not entered that, no one would have known. So
Yes.
I would suggest recommending that you continue to um, make these particular quilts, these social justice quilts, because our government is trying to um, keep society from knowing about what we've gone through, our struggles. And if it was not for your stories in quilts, Carolyn Mazlumi's, Bisa Butler, some of these artists, a lot of people would not know this. So,
Yeah,
uh,
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no,
You know,
go. I'm done.
the
I think
the whole controversy around Amy Sherrill's work, uh,
yes,
the that how the Smithsonian rejected it because she had a gay person holding the Statue of Liberty, or
yes.
in like a figure like the Statue of Liberty, and she
Mhm.
took it out of I think it was the Smithsonian, and she's now on display at the Baltimore Museum. I think it
Good for
ends
her.
at the end of this month.
Hmm.
What's
It's
her name? Name?
fabulous. It's Amy Sherrill, and she paints in what they call grayscale. So all
Hmm.
her figures, the
Uh,
faces are grayed out, but she is a realistic painter. I mean, her stuff looks like photographs, except for
Hmm.
they're all black. They're all
Hmm.
black people, but that she paints them instead of the natural skin color. She paints them in grayscale, so that the faces and everything are in tones and shades of gray. But she moved it out of the Smithsonian, or I think was it Smithsonian? I believe it's Smithsonian, because they said
Smithsonian. Yeah.
it was
Hmm.
too
Hmm.
controversial,
Hmm.
because she had a gay person holding the statue, like the
Hmm.
torch of the Statue of Liberty. And I
Hmm.
mean, she has blown up the Baltimore Museum. I mean, the where she has that show, the same show is at the Baltimore Museum right now, and it's fabulous.
Her.
So
Interesting.
you pick your venues.
Yes. Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
and,
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
yes.
you know,
Exactly.
and what I see now is so many of these young artists
Yes.
are so good. I mean,
Yes.
the work that they do is so powerful, and that they don't seem to care one way or the other where they are. And there's a ton of black museums out there now, or galleries,
Yes.
and
Yes.
Yes.
particularly here in DC and Maryland and
Hmm.
Baltimore.
Hmm.
And I see it growing. And so there's plenty of opportunity to show that work where it used to be so limited,
Yes.
for to show black work or to show ethnic minority work in any kind of museum.
Hmm.
It it's and I think it'll switch back, because right
Yes.
now this whole DEI and how you
Oh,
can't put
yes. Hmm.
so
Yes.
the African American Museum of all places is being censored with what they can put in the African
Isn't that
American
yes?
Museum.
Exactly. Exactly.
Going, this
Trying
stuff
to
ain't gonna
erase us
go
from
away.
history because they do
You
not want
know,
to face the facts.
give it 2 or 3 years and it'll be back. And hopefully after the election, all that craziness will be gone. But that kind of stuff is what's going on right now. And I think it's making people more determined to show more work that has a social justice theme to it, and not back off of it like they
Yes.
want me to.
The one of the things that I didn't mention in SACWA is the most protest friendly organization because they define the work as creative and visual. So they look at the visual art. And in the example that I showed with the red circle, they had about 20 quilts that was entered into the AQS, and you probably heard that story. But that particular quilt, and there was another one that was in that 20 exhibit called The Color of Red, because that whole line was dealing with women's rights and reproduction rights. And AQS turned it down because they thought it looked like a lady's vaginal. Can you believe it? So SACWA decided, okay, if you do not want those two particular quilts, we will pull them all. So they pulled the entire exhibit from AQS. So the SACWA is more friendlier towards social art because they're looking at it from the art perspective. Then they look at the what it's talking about, the message that it is bringing. So that's a good thing if you're able to be part of the SACO group is because of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
because
wanted to say I was at QuiltCon this year, and they had social justice pieces, but the pieces that stood out to me, I couldn't figure out why they were there.
Mm-hmm.
There were these big canvases, 60
Mm-hmm.
by 60, and it
Mm-hmm.
had 3 lines that just said Fuck,
I
Fuck.
heard about that. I just
Yes,
heard
I
about
said,
that.
there was a
I
couple
saw
of them.
that.
I just heard about that this week, and they said
Yes,
they were like, "What was that all about?"
yes, it was like, like day glow, you know, orange and
Yeah, I saw
turquoise.
that.
yeah, but I guess I mean, like I said, when we first started out,
What was the message?
I have
And
never
what
been
was the message?
in a quilt show, so I have no knowledge of how these things are conducted. But like I said, okay, basically you just have to know the rules and the regulations for each uh,
Venue, yeah.
venue that you want to exhibit in.
Mm-hmm.
And but I don't think that we should stop telling our stories, and that's no
Not at
ethnic
all.
group.
No,
That's for any group, any person that feels as though they want to express themselves creatively, that they should just do whatever it is. That's the beauty of America. We have the freedom of speech. Now, whether or
Mm-hmm.
not it's can be in a
Hold
particular
on
venue
to
or not, well, we better hold on to hope we can have it. But at the
it.
end of the day, this is the way it's supposed to be: freedom of speech and creativity and expression. And I think that any ethnic group should be able to express themselves whichever way they feel and show whatever is important to them. And
Yes.
that's hopefully.
I think that's why I am impressed with the social justice sewing academy. These are young people.
Hmm.
And when you go on that site, look at their quilts, go into their
okay.
gallery and look at their quilts. These are young people that are expressing their feelings in fiber with fabric, but
Yeah.
they're letting the world know they're not happy with what's going on. But they're also introducing the artwork in fabric to continue this story on.
The
So I, yeah.
quality of
Mm-hmm.
the artwork. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing like going to a show or being in an exhibit where you go in and you see black quilts and you just say, "Damn, these are super duper."
Oh yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
mean, the stories that you've never
Oh,
heard and the talent and the that goes into it. And you need not be, if you
every
can't do it there's some of these big shows are kind of like moved by money, right?
Yeah.
You
exactly.
know,
Exactly.
and
That's
they
the whole.
travel the same.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these ladies, they exhibit their work. They work all year on a quilt, all year, and they do that because they want to win the $25,000 prize here, the $25,000 prize in the next one. They want to make $100,000 on a quilt.
Whoa.
That's what I've seen. But there's some shows that are. This year I exhibited. Not for any particular. Well, because it was a Black show and it wasn't a quilt. It wasn't a quilt guild. It was O.V. Bartley and Brandley in Atlanta. You didn't have to. She wasn't checking on whether you buried your threads or
Right.
if you couldn't find your ruler that day and it was crooked. It was she looked at everything in a different way, and probably everything was admitted. And there were those, really serious quilters who did bury their threads, but they still had a theme. And is there a lot of people, do you guys know, that are doing, is it AI, IA?
AI.
Yeah.
AI.
Sometimes, you just say, I don't know where the world is going these days. I'm an old
Well,
girl. So you just say,
I will say
it's
that
not-
I
Go
will
ahead.
say I'm taking class number 3 on how to design quilts using AI.
Really?
And this will be my 3rd class. And it has been quite interesting to create using your ideas and your concepts. And I talked to AI and told exactly the AI what I wanted, and I didn't think it would do it. And I told it to design my kitchen, and I told it and lo and behold, AI produced my kitchen, the colors, everything that I explained. I almost fell over when I saw it. The only difference was my granddaughter about the round kitchen table. We do not have a square one. So I went back and said round, and it turned it around and made it round. So then I was able to take it into a black and white sketch to create. So there are good things about AI, and then there are things I'm not sure if I'm going to go for with AI, but there could be some positives. So because some people are starting to get into that to design quilts.
So
Yeah,
where would you take a class like that?
I'm taking it through Mancuso. Mancu is another one of those show expedition
Yes, the
exhibitors
big one.
that has a lot of classes, and he has been offering this class for the 3rd time by a lady out of South America. Her name is Christina, and this is my 3rd session. I'll
does it
be
show
doing
you
it.
does it show you how to design the quilt? Is that what it does?
She shows you how to use all of the different AI uh, apps that are there and what you do and how you do them. She will show you how she has created her quilts, but she will allow you to freeform and use your own ideas based on how to use the various apps. I didn't realize there were so many AI apps out there, but we've had to use, I've got about 6 of them now on my iPad, and I had to add a new one this morning. Free. There are those that are paid, but she's giving us the free apps. And so we go through and learn what different apps will do, how it will take a photograph and create the image that we want. And then it's up to us to design it, arrange it, that type of thing.
Put it together.
Wow.
Well, I think that's just the way of the future. I mean, those of us, like Donna says, you're an old girl, and we still kind of, want to do things the way we are used to doing things.
Oh, I'm still an old girl. It's just,
yeah,
but I was
no, I know,
curious,
but new technology, new
I
technology.
never thought that way.
Yeah,
I have a daughter, she'll say, "Oh, mom, AI," but
yeah.
Mancuso has so many shows around the country
yes, they
throughout the
do.
year.
Mm-hmm.
We could jump
I'm
there
not
and
familiar
pick
with
one.
Mancuso. What is that? I'm not familiar with it.
It's a company that has, maybe
They're out of
say
Philadelphia.
like 10 or 12, 10 shows around the country throughout the
Uh-huh.
year. Isn't there one at Virginia Beach now?
Yes. Yeah, and they
There'll
have it in
be one in
Philadelphia.
Jersey, one in Philly, one in,
But
they're
they
everywhere.
also offer Zoom because I live in Michigan, so I can't
Oh, you
always
go
make those
Zoom.
shows.
Yes.
So I do the Zooms, and they bring
Zoom.
in all of the very professional teachers, or I guess you could say certified instructors, to bring what they want. And it's up to you as to what class you think you want to take. He has been introducing more of us that he hadn't done before. So that's a good thing. And I suppose I won't say he's introduced. It could be that their schedules are busy, and I've been doing Mancuso now for 4 or 5 years, and I've only seen 1 or 2. But this year, Cookie's in it. Cookie's in it this year. So he's
Oh,
starting to.
as teachers,
Yes, as teachers.
instructors?
Yes. Yes. So he's starting to bring more of us in. I don't know if it's because of the conflict of their schedules or what, and go from there. So
New business, money, money.
oh, there you go. There you go.
I'm not familiar with that. That's the first time I've heard of that. It's part of the Mid-Atlantic Quilt Show.
Yes, yes, Mancuso.
And Mancuso.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, ladies.
Yeah, once you get on, they'll send you websites and classes, and like I said, they have them where you can actually go to them in person, or you can take Zoom classes. So.
So we can Kay and Genevieve, y'all can connect at some other point, or
I just
more
yes. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. No, we had a lively discussion, and I'm grateful for you ladies joining me today on this session of Uncut Threads, talking about the fabric of protest. And I think that, we've shared and we've learned a little bit, and going forward, I think that we should just continue to do what we do and hope that we are accepted if we want to be accepted in a quilt show. And if not, then keep on keeping on, and we'll get in something, that will accept us. So, thank you again for joining me. I really appreciate you. And you ladies have a wonderful day, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks again.
Right.
Meeting you all.
Goodbye. Pleasure meeting you, ladies.
Nice to meet everybody.
Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome. Thank you, Donna. All right. Thanks.
Lisa, get your stuff out there, Lisa.
Yeah. A little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. And it was a pleasure meeting you. Bye-bye.
You as well.
Bye-bye.
Be well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
So where can we see the meeting again if we want to?
YouTube.
Oh, okay. I'm old girl.
And we're done.